By the end of this sermon, I think that you all wish that I just read a couple chapters from Ephesians. Thank you very much for laughing. I do appreciate that. The first service was wonderful. They truly were awesome, but I don't think they laughed quite as hard at my jokes as I wanted them to. I know it wasn't because they weren't funny. I'm supposed to be giving you guys a cue. Joe said when you tell a joke, do this. So I'm doing this. Just picture applause on the two TVs there. Or laugh and applause. You can do both. I don't mind. Thank you, Doctor. My name is Rob Shoecraft, and I will be the preacher this morning. This is my first time ever preaching a sermon. Thank you very much. Don't cheer yet. Joe Bowers, our normal preacher here, the professional, he's in Knoxville right now, and he is kind of on the home stretch of his doctorate, and I know he's worked really hard for that. And he asked me to preach this morning, and it's truly an honor. I really appreciate all the support that everybody's given me here. It's my first time preaching, but it's not my first time on stage. I'm normally back here playing Seth's Stratocaster with the band here, which Aaron Walker and the AA Ronettes. That's what he makes us call it. And another place you might find me is in the pew up here, sitting next to my wonderful family and my beautiful wife, Leslie, who has an ironclad grip on my wrists, sometimes a swift kick to the shins for laughing at an inappropriate volume at inappropriate times during the sermon. And I want to give an opportunity to anybody in the congregation who might have a little inappropriate sense of humor from time to time, or maybe plays a little guitar. I would encourage you to talk to the elders of this church, to stand up here and give a sermon. It's very, very rewarding, and you might have what it takes. Joe Bowers isn't really even that good of a guitar player, and he gets paid to do this. So. Joe is a very good friend of mine, and I'm very thankful for that. I don't want to ruin our relationship by complimenting him too much. I'm already over the quota for the year, but I don't want to ruin our relationships because what I want you guys to know, what I want you to hear from this sermon is that relationships are important. And your relationship with God is everything. It's most important. But your relationship with others, your family and your friends, even the relationships that are very difficult, every relationship is important. They're all gifts from God. And they're all gifts that He has given us to learn how to grow our relationship with Him, to learn how to love Him with all the love that He deserves, and that's everything. Well, my relationship with my friend, or a friendship, if you will, with Joe Bowers, that's no exception. If you've heard Joe preach before, you know that he has a gift for preaching, and I can tell you firsthand that it takes a lot of time and effort to craft a sermon, and he does that every Sunday, and he's amazing at it. And I almost immediately got the sense that he was amazing at it when I first heard him preach, when he stepped into the role that Mike Lynn left behind a few years ago. And I absolutely adore Mike Lynn as a preacher and as a friend. But I've gotten to know Joe a little bit better. And we've known each other a little bit longer, and we're closer in age. I'm a little bit older than him, and I know he looks up to me. But I've had this very unique experience of getting to see my relationship with Joe, our friendship, grow quantifiably by paying attention to the way that I refer to him when I'm talking to people outside of the church. I'll give you an example. Might be like, a few years ago when he started, Oh, Rob, you go to church? Wow, that's surprising. Where do you go? Who's your preacher? I go to Gallipolis Christian Church up on 588. Our preacher is this new guy. He's a pretty sharp kid. I think he's probably about 15, 16 years old. He has this beautiful Al Gore-like beard. And he speaks a lot of Hebrew in his sermons. He's a lot of that kind of sound. His country folks just thought he had something in the back of his throat for a long time. A few months after that, after getting to know him, I refer to him as my preacher, who's actually a pretty cool guy. And then he became my preacher, who's also my friend. And then it was kind of like this, he's my preacher, but he's mainly my friend, but, he's my preacher. Because, the sign of a good friendship is a redundant series of awkward qualifiers to describe the relationship. Right now, he's just my friend Joe. And he's my preacher too, but someday I think we'll just be friends. Now, if this is your first time visiting, I welcome you. And you're probably thinking, unless this sermon is about some guy named Joe Bowers, this is a really weird amount of time to spend talking about him. It'd be even weirder if the sermon was really about Joe. But it's not about Joe. Again, it's about the importance of relationships. And I say all this, though, about Joe to put a fine point on how much I appreciate all the help that he gave me putting this sermon together. Because this sermon is inspired by a question that my 10-year-old son, Clark, asked me a few weeks ago. He said, "Papa?" I'm just kidding, he didn't. He gets embarrassed whenever I embarrass him. And it's not, I needed a little bit of brevity to, it was a very serious question, honestly. He said, "I don't know if I believe in God. How do we know that the Bible isn't a book of lies?" And I really appreciate Clark giving me permission to talk about this morning. I'll try not to say his name too much, but I really do appreciate it. Part of the reason he was upset, I could tell it really meant a lot to him. Part of the reason was because it was in the middle of the night when he asked me this, and there's a Richie Havens song that I really like. It's actually a cover, but he does it best, in my opinion. And it's called "Morning, Morning." And it has a lyric in it that is, "Evening, evening, I feel so lonesome in the evening. Evening always brings me grief." And I think we can all probably relate to that. We've all stayed up at night worrying about something that we have going on in our lives, whether we can control it or not, like having to preach a sermon the next morning. But a lot of us, I would imagine, a lot of you can probably relate to his question too. I mean, haven't you at some point in your walk with God questioned maybe whether the Bible is truly his word all the way through, whether it's truly inerrant? Have you questioned whether or not he's real? Have you questioned whether or not you've just been wasting your time and your energy and your trust and all that love that you put into your relationship with him? Maybe if you're like me, that question and the doubt that came with it was enough to prevent you from starting a relationship with God sooner. One of the reasons that question cut through me so much was not only because it came from somebody who I loved, but because I knew exactly what he was feeling. At least I think I do. When I was growing up, I moved around a lot, and we went to a lot of different churches, and I just did not like any of them. And all the way through my teens, I just didn't like it. I'm kind of like a party pooper anyway when it comes to organized events and gatherings. I don't know, I just have this weird hang-up with that. Not this one, this is great. But, as a kid, I would look around in the church and I'd see people putting up their hands and saying amen and praise God and telling people that I'll pray for you and all this stuff that we as Christians do, and it's beautiful. But at the time, I just felt kind of gross. I thought like there's no way that all these grown people can truly believe everything in the Bible. So they must be dishonest. Like there must be something else going on here. Maybe like the church is they're just lonely, and the church is like the straight edge fraternity for them to just kind of fulfill relationships with others, not feel so lonely. Or maybe they're just in it for networking, right? We have a lot of people to meet here. I thought whatever it is, it's got to be phony. And that really just, again, it just kind of grossed me out. Now, I want to make it very clear that this wasn't necessarily the fault of any of the churches that I attended growing up, and it wasn't a problem I had with any of the members. It's just that when you burden yourself with that kind of doubt, you feel uncomfortable in any place of worship. Now, my wife and I truly thank God for Kylie Bowers and Jasmine Johnson, who are our children's ministers and youth ministers here. Because even though I've fielded some difficult questions from my children, they both love coming here. And again, I didn't. And that is just truly a blessing. So I owe them a deep gratitude. Thank you. But here we are. I'm here. My son's there. I'm this empathetic dad who's had 30 years to ponder a question that I know is bothering my son because it was my own. And here I am with this quickly approaching January 8th deadline where I got to pick a sermon to preach on. So what better topic than one that's so doubly meaningful to me? And not only me, but I'd like to think that it has some meaning to you guys as well. Before I share the answer that I want to give Clark, that I sort of tried to give him in the middle of the night, I want to share a verse that serves as an invaluable compass, one that we should follow to share our faith with other people. And this is one that I learned, at least it first resonated with me in a sermon at my old church in Rose Hill Church of Christ in Reynoldsburg with the preacher Bill Hunt, who's just a wonderful guy. And that is from 1 Peter 3:15. But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and with respect. And to kind of paraphrase what Bill was saying, I don't think he'd care if I put words in his mouth. I think he was saying, don't sell your faith from a script. Everybody's a little different. Tell others why you love Jesus. Tell them what he's done for you, what he's doing for you, and tell them about the hope that you have. Just speak from the heart. I don't think that the Bible is given to us to prove our points necessarily. I think it's a gift that we're given to support a loving relationship with our Lord. And, it has a lot of rich history in it, but it's not a history book. And it's seeded a lot of scientific discoveries and exploration, but it's definitely not a science book. And oftentimes it's used for a tool of persuasion, but I don't think that's what it is either. At least not for us. The accuser, the evil one, Satan, as Joe would say, Chasatan, no one reacted to that in the first service. That was my best team. I apologize if I'm being offensive, honestly. I do. I love the Hebrew language, honestly. But he uses that. He's used that throughout Scripture to tempt Jesus himself, God in the flesh, master of Scripture, the author of Scripture. He thought he could trick Jesus. And he was successful. He's been successful before. He was unsuccessful there, but he's been successful for one of the first things that happened in the Bible, the Garden of Eden. He gave them a simple command, and next chapter, We talked them out of it. I think God's word has one use, and that is to nurture a loving relationship with God and his people. So when we quote Scripture, we need to make sure that we're doing it so that our audience, whether it's a child with a question or a congregation full of Christians or an atheist or anyone, we need to make sure that they know that we're quoting it from love, that they can see our love for God and why we have hope in Jesus, not why we're right about something. Because the world is full of books that do that, and I don't think the Bible is one of them. So, Rob, me, in case you forgot, you have hope in Jesus, despite questioning the validity of the Bible at one point, several points, despite wondering about the existence of God, despite having all these questions. So why don't you share with your son why you have hope? So this is my answer. God doesn't want us to defend him from other people, because that's not our role. We're ultimately powerless to do that. You know, I don't expect Clark to try to protect my honor from his peers, not when I could beat up most of their dads. I'm going to keep doing that. That's my thing. You guys keep laughing, I'll keep doing it. All right, I'm not going to be proud of him for chopping off somebody's ear, right? God doesn't want us, I don't even think, to defend him from our own doubts. I don't think that's the way to handle that, even if those doubts question his very existence. God wants you, my son, me, all of you, to have a loving relationship with him, like the one that my kids have with me and their mom and their grandparents and their cousins and their friends at school, even their relationship with Hans, Gruber, our dog, and Cobra Commander and David Lopan as well. Rest in peace. God even wants you to have a relationship with people in your life who make it very difficult, especially if you might be the cause of that difficulty. You got to put your differences aside, and you got to let those relationships grow. And he wants you to look at the life of Jesus, the perfect example of how to grow relationships with people, especially those who you might not think are deserving of your love. And I think that Jesus would be the first to tell you that these relationships, regardless of who they're with, require work. They require a lot of hard work. He stood up for people when it meant his life. And he forgave those who wanted to kill them, all the way through the point where they did. And he did this because he knew that the love that he showed others, all the work that he put in and that grind that he endured, equipped him to have a perfect, loving relationship with God. And that's not easy. And I know my son knows that's not easy, because that relationship requires work. And it can often be brutal pain and suffering and shame. It can be crippling doubt. But with everything that you put in, you can rest assured that that reward pays dividends forever. You're building that relationship to last. Hard work takes discipline, and it takes a lot of focus. It's hard to stay the course. So we need clear guidance. We don't need any less guidance than the Israelites in Exodus. I don't think we need any less guidance than the disciples trying to make sense of things in the powder keg that was ancient Rome. God knows it's tricky. He knows what we're going through. He went through it himself. So he's given us simple instructions in his word. The passage from the Bible that I try to center my life around is from Matthew 22, 36 through 40. And it's known as the Greatest Commandment. I'll give you a second to turn to that if you want. I don't have a projector, I apologize. The greatest commandment. Teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law and the prophets depend on this. I can't prove the validity of the Bible, but I can certainly prove the validity of this verse's importance. First of all, it's in 3 places in the New Testament, in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, on 3 separate occurrences with seemingly 3 different people. And it's repeated almost verbatim. And that New Testament recitation is echoed from the Old Testament in Deuteronomy and Leviticus. And I think it's interesting that it's one of the few passages, one of the few commands, the few interpretations of it that Jesus and his accusers actually agreed on. It's very important. So, moving on, taking the advice from 1 Peter, not to necessarily defend God, but to defend the hope that you have in him. My answer to that, my answer to my son, is that I have hope because every time that I've made a conscious effort, though imperfect, to follow the greatest commandment, to try to love God with all my heart and with all my soul and my strength, and to try to love others as myself, I've never had a single ounce of regret. It's given me nothing but meaning. It's just grown my love. It's grown meaning in my life. And I can't say that about anything else that I've ever come across, that I've ever spent time with. So I think I'd be a fool to let go of the hope that's been given to me just because I can't prove it. I really love the occurrence of the greatest commandment in Luke because it's followed by a very popular passage, and that is that of the teaching of the Samaritan. And it's extremely valuable in that it teaches us really the responsibility that we have to others. And others means everyone. We go to great lengths, we need to go above and beyond. But one perspective that I don't hear very often is the perspective of the victim in the story, the guy that got robbed and beat up and left in a ditch for dead. I like that perspective because, I think my son's the victim in that story. And I think I'm the victim in that story. And I think we all are. Anytime that we have doubts, anytime that we seem like we're stripped of everything that's important to us. And all we have to do is just cry out for help. It doesn't matter if we know that there's somebody on the other side of that ditch. It doesn't matter if we can hear footsteps, because we can't hear. Our eardrums have been blown out. All we can do is just muster up a cry for help. And I think in that time, whether it be physical damage or heartbreak or doubt, we don't care if somebody can hear us. We need that help. We need God's help. I don't think you need to necessarily believe in God to start a relationship with him, which I know sounds absurd. But I do know that you need to recognize that you need him. And the fact that Clark asked me this question, it tells me that he's in the perfect position for God to show up and help him. So the next step you need to take is to be bold enough to shout for help. You need to pound on God's door incessantly. You don't need to be rude about it, but don't be shy. And I don't know how long it's going to take you to get an answer that truly satisfies you is coming from him. But I know that if you study the Gospels and you focus on Jesus, particularly on how he loved others, he will answer you. Keep shouting for God's help, and he will absolutely answer you. So that's my answer to my son. And Clark's probably sitting there thinking, like, that's not what you said. I think I heard something about quantum mechanics. Leslie maybe promised not to talk about quantum mechanics. I don't know anything about him anyway. But instead of giving that sermon, which actually I'm giving right now, it's just kind of meta. Instead of giving that sermon, I came in here on Tuesday, and Joe asked me to do a dry run for him. And he was kind enough to sit in that pew, and I just went with the original sermon. Instead of a love letter, it was more of a poison pen letter to the churches, my experience in church in my childhood. And what Joe gave me in return was what he calls constructive feedback, and what Proverbs might call a gentle rebuke. And I wasn't doing this, guys. That's serious. And what those gentle rebukes can feel like when you need to hear them is a little bit of a beatdown, right? I needed a little bit of a beatdown. And he gave me a lot to chew on. He gave me a lot of bullets, and they were all truly constructive. Joe is I'm serious, he's a professional. I mean, I was very impressive. You get to have a one-on-one lesson with a preacher like Joe, take it. Even if you don't want to preach, you'll learn something. But one of the things that was kind of hardest to hear is that he said, you didn't sound like you were talking to your 10-year-old son who you love. You sounded kind of like you were addressing a cold, hardened, lifelong atheist. That wasn't really what I was going for. Matthew 12:43 through 45 says, when an unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places seeking rest, and he finds none. Then he says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when he comes, he finds it empty, swept, and put in order. Then he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. I know it's kind of an odd verse to throw in here. It's usually used for, there's a lot of debate over what that verse means, and there's talk about demonic possession and kind of an overview, like a 30,000-foot view on the state of the Israelites and their relationship with God and their relationship with the Gentiles, and I think all of that, it holds tremendous merit. So it's kind of strange that came to me after Joe's feedback. But I think it's because I thought at that time that I preached that sermon, that little dry run, that I had let all this bitterness from disbelief and all this anger with perceived phoniness in the church, I almost let that get the best of me. I almost let this little angry adolescent from my youth, me, come up here and share with you guys not why I have my hope, but just kind of a nasty message. And I thank goodness for friends like Joe, who had the strength and the thought to correct me. And I thank God for relationships built on love. I'd like to take a moment and just pray here, if you guys could bow with me. Dear Lord, thank you so much for your word, that we have such a clear path to establishing and growing a relationship with you. And that's all you want from us, Lord. You want our glory, and you want our love. And you want us to share that with other people. And you want us to learn with other people how to love you, because it is a struggle. And we don't always understand everything in the Bible. But we thank you that you've given us time and you've given us others to help us think about it and to help us learn from it. say all this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. So, you're probably sitting there wondering, what was this sermon that Rob was going to preach that's this this evil, right? It wasn't really evil necessarily. It wasn't even necessarily inaccurate. I just put the emphasis on the wrong syllable, if you will. Is that Wayne's World? Oh. I was going to focus a lot on the book of Ecclesiastes, the Old Testament book, and it is maybe my favorite book of the Bible. It's full of a lot of real talk, as R. Kelly might say. It's also full of a lot of wisdom. It's full of practical advice. It's like James, what Joe preached on last week from the New Testament, and I love it. And I did make some relevant tie-ins on how we should enjoy the fruits of our labor, and we should